All right, guys, we are actually up to our third video now covering the FX5 rumors, and things went from interesting to very, very serious, guys. We have a lot to cover in this video. I will have chapters for you guys available as well if you want to quickly skip through, but there is so much to talk about. This is super exciting, guys. And yeah, let's just get right into it. Now, this by far is the most exciting rumor we've heard so far, and it is all pointing towards it being more reality. Now, this is no longer just about 5K open gate. We've got new rumors now of triple base ISO and internal X-OCN RAW. This is crazy, guys. And if you don't know what that is, I'm going to be talking more about it shortly. But if this is true, this is essentially a brand new camera. It's not going to be an FX3 Mark II like we've been saying for a while. It's going to be a completely new cinema tier, guys. Now, first, as you know, we're all kind of talking about the 5K open gate, the global shutter, possibility of a stack sensor, and whether this camera was going to be the true FX3 successor. Obviously, a lot of us already know this is probably not a successor, but a complete new camera on its own between the FX3 and the FX6. But now, with this new rumor speculating that the FX5 could potentially have triple base ISO and internal X-OCN RAW, this is going to be an insane camera, guys. And if this is true, guys, this pretty much means this is more of a Mini Burano than it is a Venice, because the Burano is under the Venice, and it makes more sense given the specs and everything so far, but we're going to get more into it. Now, quick disclaimer, obviously, these are still rumors at this point. Nothing is confirmed until obviously Sony announces the camera, but we are analyzing the possibilities and not claiming official specs yet, but we're going to be talking about what triple base ISO could mean, the global shutter, and as well as the internal X-OCN RAW. All right, let's keep getting into it. Now, I want to talk to you guys why this particular rumor matters. Because while 5K open gate is exciting alone, it's not the whole story anymore. We've got the idea now of triple base ISO, which affects exposure and real world shooting. We have the X-OCN, which affects grading, Kodak workflow, media, and post-production. And these are not basic creator camera specs anymore. They point to a more serious cinema tool. It is still part of the FX line. Now, Mini Burano is more of a better framing now than a Mini Venice. And look, the reason this rumor matters is because these are not just random spec sheet upgrades. Triple base ISO and X-OCN are very cinema-focused features. And these are the kind of features that affect how you shoot, how you expose, how you grade, and how much storage you need, and what kind of jobs this camera actually makes sense for. So for me, this starts pushing the FX5 away from just a compact FX3 replacement and more towards a proper cinema tool. Maybe not a Mini Venice, but possibly a Mini Burano. And that, for me, is still super exciting. Now let's talk about the triple base ISO. We've seen the dual native base ISOs on the cameras like the Sony a7 IV, which has the ISO of 800 and 8000, the a7S III, the FX3, which have base ISOs of 640 and 12800, but a triple base ISO, guys. I mean, we're talking in the range between 640, 800, then 6400 or 3200, and then jumping to 12800. So that would be insane. Right now, as you know, if you're going from 800 to 12,800, you more than likely have to chuck an ND on top, just to mitigate the light, unless you want to crank the shutter, but no one really wants to do that, especially for more professional work. So having a triple base ISO where you can go from 800 to, let's say, 6400, and then from 6400 to 12,800 and get clean ISOs all around, guys, that's perfect. That would be insane. So what that pretty much means is we'll have a clean low base, clean middle base, and a clean high base for the ISO. So it's not only useful for daylight, it'll be useful for interior, night work, events, and controlled sets, which is a huge deal. Really, really big deal, guys. Now, don't get me wrong. People will still be focusing on global shutter and X-OCN formats, but ISO affects every single shoot, guys. So this is a big one, and I'm really excited to see if a triple base ISO actually does happen, because that will be incredible. And to be honest, the triple base ISO might be the sleeper feature of the whole camera. Don't get me wrong, global shutter is amazing, especially if we get it. The X-OCN sounds amazing, but it's also very expensive and quite professional. Will that add towards the cost of the camera in terms of the cards and everything like that? We're going to talk about that in a bit. But triple base ISO, that's practical for everyone, and it's definitely useful. So I'm really looking forward to that feature. I wasn't even on my mindset, to be honest. I thought maybe like a dual native, but a triple base ISO. That's something I can definitely get behind. Now, a lot of people have speculated different mounts. Like I said, I think it's more realistic between the 640, 800 to, let's say, 6400 to 12,800. Some people, from what I'm reading, are suggesting 1600, 12,800, and 51,200. Exciting on paper, but probably too extreme for most everyday production work. When are you really going to use 51,200 ISO or even 12,800 as a second base if you're outdoors and stuff? So 1600 still seems pretty high. I remember on the A9 III when I had it, it was a base ISO of 2000, and 2000 for the most part was very impractical, especially when you were shooting outdoors during the day. At night, sure, it's okay, but it's still not ideal. So 640 or 800 to maybe 5,000 to 6,400, and then 12,800 to 1,600. But I really think 800, 6,400, and 12,800 seems like the most practical, but I guess only time will tell, because these numbers are going to be crazy. But that seems the more realistic kind of approach, especially if we're looking at dual native ISOs from previous cameras like the A7 V, the FX3, the A7S III, how they approached it. I think it makes more practical sense. Now, let's talk about the global shutter. We still don't know for sure. Last time we had reports that it was a bit conflicting on whether it will be a global shutter or what kind of sensor it will be, especially given the price range of what they estimate between, let's say, 4,200 USD to 5,000 USD. A global shutter would obviously be a lot more expensive, even though it's more practical and probably better, and most people would prefer it. It would definitely amp the price of the FX5. Now, just a quick recap on global shutter. The global shutter pretty much will remove rolling shutter, which is a huge for action. If you do fast movement, whip pans, flashes, and LED lighting, it'll be pretty much non-existent. It'll be pretty much what we see with our eyes. Now, here's the thing about global shutter. If Sony has managed to combine a global shutter sensor with triple base ISO, that could be their way of making the sensor much more usable in real production. It's not just cool. 3 ISO numbers that are clean. It could be Sony trying to solve one of the biggest concerns people have with global shutter. Because for me, with global shutter on the A9 III, was that it just had one base ISO, native ISO, which was 2000. Unlike other cameras like the FX3, the A7 V, which has a partially stacked sensor having ISO of 800 and 8000. So if they can solve that, that's going to be massive. That was one of my biggest contentions. It's not to say that, you know, global shutter has less dynamic range or anything like that than a stack sensor. It was more, can they implement a dual native system? And over here now, it's possible that they might be implementing a triple. Instead of a dual native ISO, they might be implementing a triple ISO feature with global shutter. If so, that would be crazy. But I would imagine that price range of 4,200 to 5,000 is going to go a lot up. But we'll keep going and we'll talk more about that. Now, on my previous video, there was someone that commented on internal X-OCN and saying that that should be implemented on the FX5. Well, we have some good news. We have an update. It looks like that might be more of a possibility now than we had interpreted before. We didn't know anything about X-OCN coming to the FX5, but now this is something that seems to be more prominent, which, again, would bring it closer to the Mini Burano than the Venice. Now, the X-OCN is pretty much Sony's high-end cinema RAW style workflow. It essentially means we would have internal RAW finally in these cameras. Now, it's obviously associated more with the Venice and Burano style of production, and there's obviously more grading flexibility than normal internal 10-bit codecs. Now, I just want to mention, guys, X-OCN isn't just some random codec. This is Sony's high-end cinema RAW style workflow, and it is the kind of thing you associate with the Venice, the Burano, and higher-end productions and proper color pipelines. Now, there is an issue with something like the X-OCN, and that's the file size problem. X-OCN is exciting, but it's not magically tiny. The best way to explain this in layman's terms, in simple terms, is the X-OCN, especially like the ST, can be roughly similar in size to higher quality RAW formats like the Red NE or the Red HQ. So if Sony gives heavier X-OCN options, media and storage costs could become quite hefty, especially if you're buying the FX5 and then you have to buy new media cards. That's something you're going to have to consider, as well as the possibility of new batteries, which seems at this point more likely than not. Now, a fix for this could be if Sony implements X-OCN LT. which would be a more practical everyday use of that format. And I hope they bring that along if the X-OCN format does come into play. I think it's going to be more for the kind of higher end productions where they're doing more commercial shoots, features and stuff like that, where this will be utilized. However, I still imagine we will keep the 10-bit codecs unless they come out with something new, because I guess after 10-bit, we might as well just have internal RAW, but time will tell. Now, we're also talking about the potential of a CFexpress 4.0. And if this is the case, a modern Type A 4.0 cards can advertise around 1800 MBS read and 1600 MBS plus write, depending on the card. And faster media matters, especially when you're shooting internal RAW, higher frame rates, 5K open gate. So it's going to be interesting to see whether that's going to happen or not. But especially if we do get internal RAW, this is something we're going to have to consider. We're not going to be able to use necessarily the V90 cards anymore. We're going to have to start using CFexpress. So if that's the case, things are going to get very expensive quickly. If this is the case, where Sony wants to give us the internal X-OCN, the high frame rates, and the 5K open gate, then the media pipeline has to be able to keep up. And something like the CFexpress 4.0, based on the PCIe Gen 4, and in simple terms, it's just going to be a lot faster than older CFexpress standards. But again, it's going to get a lot more expensive very, very quickly. I mean, so look, you're looking at roughly 2 gigabytes per second per lane. So CFexpress Type A can theoretically reach around 2 gigabytes per second. Type B can reach around 4 gigabytes per second, and then Type C can go even higher. Sony obviously normally uses the CFexpress Type A, and the newer Type A 4.0 cards are already advertising speeds of around 1800 megabytes per second read and 1600 megabytes per second write, depending on the card. So if Sony is planning internal X-OCN in a compact body, maybe this is the point where CFexpress 4.0 actually starts to matter. Because the camera is only one part of the equation. The sensor, the processor, heat management, codec and card slots all work together. So are we going to possibly see a dual CFexpress card system that also takes SD cards for the lower formats if you want to shoot regular 4K? I'd imagine so. But I'm really curious to see how it's going to handle. All right, we're going to be talking again about 5K open gate versus 6K. Because I've noticed in a lot of the comments and a lot of people are saying, if it doesn't have 6K, I'm not interested. Some people care about 5K, some people want more, some people want less. I do think 5K open gate is useful for 4K delivery, the reframing, stabilization, and vertical horizontal crops. I've been saying this, that I'm a big fan of the idea of having open gate. I know a lot of people don't care about it, but for someone like myself, as I've reiterated, that I do normally shoot vertical and horizontal, and being able to reframe on the same shot and not having to do it again is a big deal for me. But I'd be actually honestly happy with 5K. If there is 6K, that'd be awesome. But especially like for YouTube and stuff as well, where I can still crop down, I think 5K will be plenty. However, with that being said, a lot of the comments talking about 6K, I think they have a point as well, where 6K has become more normal and accepted in 2026. So, I mean, it is still possible to see it, and you guys still have valid points there. Also, if there is no 6K, that may mean there's not going to be a clean 4K APS-C crop mode like we see on something like the A7 IV, which downsamples from a 7K sensor. Now, the bigger resolution will especially be useful for people that shoot wildlife, surf, sport, weddings, or just shooters that care about crops for that extra reach. I definitely think it has a place. It's not everything, but it would be nice to see in a camera like the FX5. Now next, I want to talk about the internal NDs. Everyone, for the most part in the comments, want internal NDs. They would prefer it over the 5K open gate. They would prefer it over the IBIS, and I get it. I would love that too, more than anything probably. I think it would be such an awesome feature. This is one of the reasons I almost picked up the FX6. The internal NDs would be phenomenal. The C80 has it, the FX6 has it, and if this had it, it would be amazing. However, the question is whether logistically it would be able to fit in a body that's compact, smaller than the FX6, a little bit bigger than the FX3. That's where things get really interesting. Now, obviously, the internal ND would make the FX5 much closer to something like the FX6 Burano workflow. And this would be huge for like run and gun, documentary, weddings, events, outdoor commercial work, you name it. Internal NDs has a place anywhere, guys. It's phenomenal to have, and I would be ecstatic if it had it, and I know a lot of you guys would be as well. But again, it may be hard in a small body that has IBIS, cooling, and large media needs. I just don't think it's practical as much as I would love to see it. And obviously Sony also has to think about, protecting the FX6 and the Burano positioning as well. Otherwise, they pretty much cannibalize that line. And it's like, why should I go for a Burano or an FX6 when I can go something like the FX5? So I'd imagine that's also a full process in terms of the marketing and how they're going to approach this. So, I mean, just treat internal NDs more of a dream feature that's not guaranteed. I think it's more unlikely than likely at this stage. I mean, if they gave it to us, people would lose their minds. I mean, if we got internal NDs, like I think these would sell like hotcakes. I still think it will, but internal NDs would just be, it'd be phenomenal. All right, let's keep going on. Now, we got to talk about the pricing again. Now, originally we were talking around the price range of 4,200 to 5,000 USD. I mean, like, if the rumors are true, that's almost too good. For a camera like this, I think 5,000 USD is reasonable. Then we go a little bit higher, 5,000 to 5,500 USD, which seems a little bit more realistic, especially if it has triple base ISO. It's got the internal X-OCN formats, the 5K open gate, and maybe, possibly, global shutter. Still feels a bit lower than it should be if it does have global shutter, but there is one more as well, speculation for pricing, 6,000 USD. And this is where people will compare it closer to something like the FX6, the Canon C80, the C400, the Red Komodo, and used higher end cinema cameras. Now, the camera may be expensive to buy, and it's going to be even more expensive to run, especially if you guys plan on using something like the internal X-OCN RAW formats. So that's something else to keep in mind. And look, I mean, if we have global shutter and all these things, I don't think Sony is going to give it to us for very cheap. I definitely don't see that happening. I can't see that happening. If it lands around the 5,000 USD to 5,500 USD, that feels more realistic. And I'd be actually okay with that. It's expensive, don't get me wrong, but you're paying for a premium cinema line camera. So that would be crazy. So what does this mean for Sony's lineup? So right now we've got the FX3, which is more the compact cinema creator camera. Sold like hotcakes. I had it for a while. Obviously I changed to the A7 V, which I love. Then we've got the FX6, which is more professional, run and gun, doco style with internal NDs. Then we have the Burano, which is more the high-end mobile cinema camera with Venice DNA, but very expensive as well. We're talking like 20K plus. Australian dollars, that is. This could be a new tier that sits between FX3 and the FX6, but also slash Burano, if you think about it that way, especially if it has some of these internal features like the RAW, the triple native ISO, etc. That could be really interesting. Now, the reason I don't believe this is an FX3 replacement is because the FX3 is still an incredible camera. It still has a place on the market, and it'll be obviously a lot more affordable than something like the FX5. So it's not like, oh, the FX3 is redundant and now it's a terrible camera. You can still get it. If you guys have a budget that's just enough for the FX3, I wouldn't wait for something like the FX5. I think it'll be a lot more expensive, and I think it's for a different type of creator slash filmmaker, guys. So I still think the FX3 will have a place. This will just sit above it. I still think the FX3 is one of the, the best, most compact cinema cameras that Sony has offered. For me, the biggest thing was I just didn't like the screen. I think the screen could definitely improve the LCD, and I hope we see that on the FX5. So my final takeaways. So from what we know about these new rumors is we have a triple base ISO, which is crazy for real world shooting flexibility. Internal X-OCN for internal RAW formats. That would be serious for, cinema workflow, for, cinematographers, etc. The only thing is, hopefully they bring an LT version of the X-OCN, so we have a lighter version to work with. The CFexpress 4.0, which would make internal RAW and high frame rates more realistic and possible for shooting. 5K open gate, useful, but there is a lot of 6K criticism as well, whether we're going to see 6K or we're going to see 5K. I still think it'll be more towards the 5K. FX5 kind of makes sense, but time will tell. Global shutter, that's huge, especially if the quality holds up. And with a triple base ISO, I definitely think it could. They've learnt a lot from the A9 III when the global shutter released on that. So something like this could make a huge difference. The internal ND, dream feature at this point, guys. Don't think too much onto it as much as I want it as well. The price, that'll be the final deciding factor. Are we looking at 5,000 USD or are we going to look at 7,000 USD? I mean, that's the big question, isn't it? The A1 II is sitting at like over 10K Australian, and that doesn't have a global shutter. So it's something to think about. It's obviously a fully stacked sensor, amazing, but not a global shutter. And that's 10K Australian, guys, which is closer to, I think it's like 6,500 USD. I'll confirm just in case, but it's high, it's up there. And obviously the Mini Burano is a stronger framing now than a Mini Venice at this point. It just makes more sense. So my overall take is this. If this rumor is true, the FX5 has just become so much more interesting. And like, as soon as it's announced, if it has these kind of features, I am placing an order. You can bet I'm going to place an order right away. I'm not going to wait. My A7 aren't going anyway, but this will be my new A cam. The X-OCN, super interesting. Internal RAW finally. Whether I will use it or not, I don't know. Cards are expensive. Storage is expensive. I mean, I've got the storage for it, but realistically, am I getting paid high enough for those kind of commercial shoots where I need to be shooting internal RAW? Probably not, but it's nice to have if I want to later on, especially for bigger production shoots. Now, the CFexpress 4.0 could be the media side that makes those higher bit rates possible. The 5K open gate could be extremely useful, and I think the open gate will definitely come on a camera like this. It just makes more sense, especially for more modern creators that are now shooting horizontal and vertical as well. I think it would be a really nice feature to have. I know people want 6K, could happen. Otherwise, I will settle with 5K. Now, last thing I want to talk about super quickly is the sensor. I still think we're going to get the same sensor as I mentioned in the previous video, that it's going to be the 16 megapixel sensor. I do think that makes the most realistic sense, or they could go to a 24 megapixel sensor. I mean, 24 megapixel, you'd still be getting good low light and everything like that, but I think it'll be closer to the 16. Could be wrong. I am curious to see what they're going to come up with regarding that as well. But the triple base ISO, guys, the global shutter, these are things I'm really, really stoked about. Obviously as well, like I would like it to have IBIS. I know a lot of people don't care about IBIS, saying they don't need it in cinema cameras, but I'm so used to having it on the FX3, the A7S3, the A7 V, the A7 R6. All of these have IBIS. And while people say it's not great or you can use Catalyst Browse, it is a nice feature to have. I use the dynamic stabilization all the time. It is a really nice feature to have, especially if you're doing handheld solo shooting, run and gun. It is fantastic, guys, believe me. It does do a little bit of a crop in. That's why having the 5K or 6K resolution option will be great. As it starts cropping in, it's not cropping in on that 4K. So that would be nice to have for me. But overall, guys, I mean, geez, this is a lot to take in. And as we're in July now, we're getting closer and closer. I am getting more and more excited about the possibility of the FX5 and how realistic this is going to be. And this could be the biggest camera Sony has released for a while. I mean, like, think of it when the FX3 came out and how massive that was, like how well it went. Then the FX6. I mean, even today, documentary filmmakers, shooters are still shooting on the FX6 and swear by it. Don't get me wrong, amazing camera. But there was a few things I didn't like about the FX6. So if the FX5 can correct that in a smaller, more compact body, which is what I would prefer anyway, then it's a no-brainer. I still think the FX6 will have a market, and I think the FX3 will have a market. So will the Burano. I think the FX5 will be a new tier of the FX cinema line, where it's not going to cannibalize or replace these other ones. It's just going to be a different camera. Anyway, let me know in the comments what you guys think about all these new things. And I'm super excited. I'm going to keep you guys updated. As soon as there's new info, I'm going to be the one to cover it. You can find it here, and we will keep the conversation going until we have the final answer from Sony themselves of what the FX5 will feature. Anyway, that's it for this video, guys. Hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you guys on the next one. Stay safe and be well.